Right, I think we will get started. I think we've probably got one or two people still on their way in, but we'll just do a wee introduction. I'm Angela Hughes. I am co-chair of the PRCA Scotland Committee, and we're here today for another one of our Secrets of My Success webinar. And today we're joined by Chris Stars, who is the former head of corporate comms at Police Scotland. And Chris has also got a background in local authority comms and also quite a number of years in journalism. So I'm expecting today to be an interesting conversation, lots of insight around public sector comms, emergency comms, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit from his days as a journalist, so some tips from the other side of the fence, so to speak. We have quite a lot of people today. I think we've got between 35 and 40 people, so that's a really nice sized audience. If you do have any questions as we are talking, please feel free to put them into the chat and I will put them to Chris. But I think we'll just get started. It'll be a little bit like an informal job interview, no pressure, Chris. There's no wrong answers. Chris, if you want to just maybe start off by giving us a little bit of an overview of your career, from sort of, I guess, start to finish, a little bit of a synopsis.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for asking me to do this, Angela. I see a few people from Police Scotland on here, so I assume you're all missing me rather than just looking for CPD points. So a brief synopsis of my career in journalism and comms. I was working for about 36 years until I retired there at the end of June, early retirement. I spent 16 years as a journalist. After uni, I just did like an English degree. I did the Westminster Press training course, which doesn't exist anymore. And that was through a job at the Westmoreland Gazette in Kendal, which was part of the Westminster Press group at the time. And they sent me on their diploma course to their training centre down in Hastings in East Sussex, which I think eventually got taken over by PA, and is gone, doesn't exist anymore. So I spent a couple of years at the Westmoreland Gazette. Then I moved to the Lancashire Evening Post, just down the road in Lancaster, and then moved again to their head office in Preston, where I spent a couple of years latterly as the crime corps there. Did that for a while. Then I went to the Edinburgh Evening News, and I was there for about 2 weeks when the news editor came over and said, Chris, you're the new health corps, because Tom Little was leaving. Didn't know anything about health. So anyway, I did that for a while, but I only stayed there for 6 months. And then I went to the Herald in Glasgow, where I spent 10 years. Roughly about six or 7 years of that was as a general news reporter, and then 3 years or so as night news editor, which really, really good job. I really enjoyed that. Then at that time, though, I had quite a young family, and the only time my oldest boy was in primary school, and the only time I saw him was when I was driving to work, and he was walking home from school with a childminder, because that shift was 4 p.m. till 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. every day. So I decided I needed to get out, and I'd done everything I wanted to do in journalism, didn't want to work anywhere else. I mean, at that time, the Herald was a really, really good newspaper. It was a great place to work. Anyway, I wanted to move on, and moving into PR was a kind of obvious transition for a journalist. I applied for a few jobs without success, quite a few jobs actually, and then eventually the job of media manager at Strathclyde Police came up, and I thought that this is an ideal job for me, given my background as a crime corps and having worked in kind of what would have called hard news my whole career as a journalist. So it was an obvious job for me to go for, and I was really lucky to get that. Spent 2 years there. I would have stayed longer, but there was a job at Glasgow City Council come up as a PR manager, and I moved. I went for that. Well, I applied for that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I took a quite a significant pay cut when I left the Herald, to go to Strathclyde Police, but I did that consciously because I knew that some things are more important than money at that point. I was having a a kind of work-life balance, but I also wanted experience working in a local authority and a big organisation. I mean, Glasgow's one of the biggest local authorities in Europe, and experience working in a political environment. Although the job was politically restricted, you were working in a political environment, and I wanted that experience. And lastly, by the time I left Strathclyde Police, I had ambitions to become head of comms there, or potentially another police service that existed in Scotland at the time. But I felt I needed to leave so I could come back. I wouldn't have got that job if it come up and applied for it at the time. I didn't think so. I consciously left with the view to potentially coming back at some point in the future. I didn't realise I would stay away so long though. It was 10 years I had at Glasgow, which was again, I absolutely loved that job. It was a great place to work. And then in 2017, the job of head of comms at Police Scotland came up, and I applied for that, and I was lucky enough to get that. So that's a kind of potted history of my career.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chris. That was a very quick summary of 36 years of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm quite keen to sort of go back to the start of your career. You spent 16 years in journalism, and you said that going into PR was an obvious transition for a journalist, and it is a common move that lots of journalists do make. But I have come across some journalists that have made that move myself, and it really hasn't worked out for them. I think that some people come into PR expecting it to be a certain way, and it turns out that it's not, and then they sort of go back to journalism. Is that something that, like, does that resonate? I mean, obviously you've stayed in PR, but that kind of, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. Does that resonate for you? And did you feel that there was a little bit, obviously you came into that with 16 years of work experience, so you were, you're mature and professional, but were there certain aspects of the job that you thought, oh, gosh, this was not what I was expecting, and there was a bit of a learning curve there?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a learning curve, and I think going into any new organisation, there's a learning curve. Going into a role I'd never done before with no experience and no qualifications into PR, or comms was a big transition for me. But I think I was lucky because of the type of organisation and the type of PR we were doing. I never worked in an agency like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
or in kind of, PR for a bank or something like that. And I don't think I would have necessarily enjoyed that or been any good at it. I think um, I enjoyed the job I did in policing and local authority because it was so close to what I used to be writing about all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And but you'd also mentioned about being given the sort of health correspondent brief. Was that how was that? Was that a bit of a surprise as well? Again, I suppose a bit of a learning curve there within
Yeah, I mean, it
journalism.
was. It was. I mean, I was only in the door, as I say, a few weeks, and uh, it was a big. I didn't know really very much about health at all, but so you had to learn very quickly about the subject matter and um, find contacts, and it was at the evening news was a lot of pressure to bring in stories there, so um, it was a bit of a scramble for a few months covering that, and had to write a feature every week as well. Very time consuming.
Yeah.
I didn't really enjoy that job so much.
Okay, okay. And you'd mentioned at the start of your career you did some journalism type qualifications. Did you do the same when you moved into PR, or have had, like, at any point in your PR career, the sort of 20 years that you worked there, did you do PR qualifications, and what did you do? Did you find it helpful?
No, I didn't. As I say, all I've got is an English degree and a postgraduate diploma in newspaper journalism. never did any formal qualifications in PR or comms. Did lots of training, individual bits of training on, crisis comms or
Mhm.
strategic communications and so on, but never did anything formal. I guess at the level I went into, I thought maybe I'm okay. I'll be able to wing it, be able to wing it for a while, make it up as I'm going along. And then obviously as I was getting older, I personally didn't really see the point at then doing any formal qualifications. But had I been younger, yeah, I would definitely have looked at maybe doing a diploma or something in PR. I mean, I'm conscious there's a lot of people I know in journalism and comms who don't even have a university
Mhm.
degree. They've gone
Mhm.
straight from
Yep.
school, and there's some of the best people in the industry I know. So qualifications are great, but also life experience and just your experience doing the job can be really good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that. I mean, I do have qualifications myself, but I find myself nowadays when I'm talking to people in interviews, particularly at entry level, yes, the qualifications are good, but your attitude, your willingness to learn, being able to show initiative, all those kind of, I guess,
Yeah,
what you might call personal qualities are so important as well. And it's that kind of thing that potentially will get you ahead once you're in a
yeah,
professional role and professional environment.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Um, just thinking about your sort of your rise through the ranks through the various stages of your career, and we can take in your sort of journalism and the PR side of things, and you might have sort of different answers for both of those. But who or what was influential in your career progression? Did you have, were there any great mentors? Maybe there was a great editor in your journalism days, or a senior leader that you've worked with in the PR side of things.
Yeah, I guess with a couple of people. I mean, I think I was fortunate to always really have a good a good line manager in every job I had, except one. I won't say which one that was. Um, uh, and obviously in some of the places I worked, I mean at the Herald, there was a lot of change on the news desk and higher up in editorial um, roles as well. So there was a lot of different people, but I mean, even going back to the training course I did, Westminster Press, there was a few of the trainers there they were all working journalists, and they used to come and they would do 2 or 3 years as a trainer on the training course. Some really good people there, and the Westminster Press course as well involved the way they'd structured that. You had to produce a portfolio of work, and other journalists from around the Westminster Press group all got involved in looking and assessing what you were producing. And so by the end of that training course, there's maybe 30 journalists, working journalists, had had a hand in your training, and some of them were just really, really good people to learn from. Of course, it's nearly 40 years ago, so I don't really remember all the names right enough.
Mhm.
I do remember though, probably the best news editor I ever had was a woman called Jill Gray at the Lancashire Evening Post. And there was a lot of young reporters working there at the time, and we all absolutely loved Jill. We loved working for her, and she just made you feel, if you were out on a door knock or something and you're coming back with an interview and a picture, you felt you were doing it for Jill, you felt you were doing it for her, and
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
didn't want to let her down.
Mhm.
And she taught me a lot about getting the most out of people and managing people. Um, and I suppose in my PR jobs, I have to say Colin Edgar at Glasgow City Council taught me a lot. He was probably one of the best managers I ever
Mhm.
had in my career, and he taught me a lot about PR, and how to work in a political environment. As I say, it was a politically restricted job,
Mhm.
but you're working for politicians, and he taught me a lot about that. There's also a couple of council directors actually who taught me about that as well, around not trying to understand the motivation of what a politician was looking for, because sometimes there was no logical reason for it. But don't stress with it, just go with it. Um And I remember another director taught me a thing about if you're trying to work out why something had happened, um, the one question she said, the one question you always need to ask is who benefits from this, and I always remember that, and that stuck with me for the rest of my career in terms of you know, if you're dealing with a difficult situation and you're trying to work out where it was going to go, consider who was benefiting from it.
Mhm.
I just thought that was really peaceful, a really useful piece of advice.
Yeah.
And then I guess just come back to journalism briefly. The Herald. I was one of the youngest people in the newsroom, and there was a lot of really talented writers there at the time. It was a fantastic place to work, really great atmosphere, and I learned a lot from those folk, and some of them are still my best friends today. I really loved working there. It was a great environment. I learned a lot, and then I, I suppose as well, when I moved to Strathclyde Police, as I said earlier, I didn't have any experience in comms or PR, so I had to actually learn from the people that I was managing in the department.
Yeah.
I learned a lot
Yeah.
from them as well.
Okay. Okay. Good. We've got a question in specifically regarding your role at the council. With so much happening across the organisation, what was your process for prioritising messaging and focusing comms activity? Did you get a clear steer from the council leaders? If not, how did you manage or influence that approach?
Yeah, so at the council it was quite easy because at that time the priorities of the council were jobs and education and inward investment. So all the comms we did focused on that, but inevitably as well, when you're working at a place like a local authority, you know, they're providing universal services in some case, you know, so services that every single person in the city use, like bin collections, roads maintenance, and so on. So a lot of that work drove your comms because that's what you had to communicate about. But in terms of all the proactive stuff we did, it was all about job creation. Particularly when I was at Glasgow, I started there 2 weeks before they won the bid for the Commonwealth Games.
Mm.
So I was there for the whole of that period. So the Commonwealth Games was a massive priority, and obviously part of that was some of the legacy work around um, apprenticeships and graduate placements and work and so on. So we did loads of really proactive comms on job creation attached to the Commonwealth Games. So that was it was pretty straightforward in terms of understanding the political
Mhm.
direction we were going. So what was the other one you wanted me to answer there?
It was just, well, I think that's basically you've answered
Yeah.
that question. One of the questions that has been asked, and it's actually my next question as well, is to tell us about your best pieces of work. What are the pieces of work that you're most proud of, or what's been most memorable for you? You've obviously mentioned the Commonwealth Games there, which I assume is, part of the highs. I remember that well. There was a real buzz in the city around all of that. So I can imagine working on it at the front line must have been hard work, but also exciting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, as I say, the the I was involved in the comms around obviously just I'd only started there when they won the bid. So after that there was a massive push very quickly to get on with the work to deliver the games, starting with the construction of some of the infrastructure, the Emirates Arena in Glasgow, which wasn't actually being built for the Commonwealth Games. That was being built anyway, although they added the cycle track on uh, because of the games. So I was involved in comms around the construction. I mean, I remember doing a photo call out at the Emirates Arena when it was a building site. It was basically a flat piece of earth, and we did the first pictures and so on. And then all the stories around the construction work, the job creation, taking apprentices out to Emirates Arena and other places for photo calls with the council leader, opening of facilities, work with some work with the athletes, although that was Glasgow Life mostly did that work. Um, and then during the Commonwealth Games, or sorry, for the lead up to for about a year before it, And then during it, the role I had was comms lead for what's called city operations, which was the work that sat beside all the actual game stuff itself, the sport. City operations was the work that was done to allow Glasgow to continue to operate with this massive event placed on top of it. So that involved, we wrote to something like 120,000 residents and businesses um, with information about road closures, the impact on their businesses, and so on. Some of those letters, a large number of those letters were personalised letters. I mean, I remember we had to write to people who were affected by a marathon one day and then a cycle road race the next day, and it was bespoke messaging, and it was a massive piece of work. But it was really, really enjoyable. Also involved like comms. We eventually took over the function of issuing parking permits. We had to decide who was getting parking permits.
In the comms
Residents.
team. And why was that? Just because of the potential reaction to it?
Yeah, it's because the transport people worked out where the road closures were going to be and so on. But you know, the role of city operations comms was to mitigate the impact of the event on residents and businesses, and to be the voice of those people.
Yeah.
So we ultimately took on the role of just issuing the passes. And there was some residents had um, barriers put in their gardens and to close off streets. I mean, literally, we're putting their garden, and it's a big metal barrier coming across the street with no access for vehicles for like 2 or 3 weeks before the games. So
Yeah, it's huge disruption for them.
we actually went to about 600 addresses and chapter doors and asked people, how's this going to affect you? Do you get prescriptions delivered? Do you rely on home care? And come up with a massive spreadsheet of impact, and then worked with other people in the council to put mitigation in place to reduce that impact as far as possible. So I was really, really, really sort of, I guess, proud to have worked on that, because it was a massive
Yeah,
piece
that's
of work.
huge.
And it was, I mean, I remember the chief exec said afterwards, if city operations hadn't worked, the games wouldn't have been a success at all.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it was,
Could have been
yeah,
very different. Yeah, and
yeah.
and I guess as part of all of the games planning, I assume you would have had to have done some crisis preparation, simulations, that type of thing.
Yeah, a wee bit, but obviously that was led by the police. Police Scotland was responsible for the security of the games, safety and security. So they led all of the work around what you would describe as crisis comms. Although we would obviously have a role in that as a category 1 responder as well. So, but the police led all of that.
Okay. Um, Great, thanks for that. We've got another question, and we've got another couple of questions actually. I'll read one. What advice would you give to a journalist transitioning into PR in an interview? It's very daunting trying to join the dots between the two careers without PR experience.
Yeah, it is difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, depends what role you're going for. Sometimes the people involved in interviews are not PR people themselves, depending on how senior the role is. I think the most important thing for any journalist or a comms person is to remember what we always called the golden rule of journalism, which was accuracy.
Mm.
And another core principle is never assume anything, and focus on attention to detail. And in terms of going for a job, that so you actually try and do that in your job, in your day-to-day job, so you can then talk about it at an interview, but also understand the organisation you're going for, that you're going to work for. I think it's really crucial to actually really, really understand how the organisation you work for works and what it does. You need to immerse yourself in it, and you need to become indispensable. You need to become the person who, if you're going to leave, you want them to say, how are we going to cope when this guy leaves?
Yeah,
Or this
make
woman
yourself
leaves? This
useful.
person leaves? Some of the Police Scotland people on the call might be saying, how did we cope when he was there? Never mind. But I think that's what you want to do. So when you're going in for an interview, you need to demonstrate that you really understand the organisation that you're
Yeah,
going to work for, that you're applying for.
okay. I want to come back to something that you mentioned earlier, which is, I guess, kind of related to that, where you said that you were really keen to get a head of comms job in the police, but you felt that you had to leave to come back into that role. Why
Yeah.
was that? What was your thinking behind that? Because I think that's probably quite good career advice for people as well that might potentially find themselves in a similar situation.
I just think because I didn't have any experience in PR beyond the at that point 2 years I'd done in Strathclyde Police. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if the job had come up and I applied, I might have got it. But I just thought the more experience you can demonstrate in a range of organisations, the better. Um, and as I say, particularly working in a bigger organisation, which I mean, Glasgow is about what 4 or 5 times the size of Strathclyde
Mhm,
Police in terms
mhm.
of staff numbers. Um, I just thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, you need to sort of broaden your experience
Yeah,
to sort of bag that
uh,
more senior leadership role. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
So we've had a wee chat there around one of your career highs around the Commonwealth Games. What about any career lows in terms of maybe something that with hindsight you think, oh, I could have handled that better, or any mistakes that you've made? I think that, mistakes are a good way to learn and to develop your
yeah,
skills. Is there anything that stands out from your career that was a bit of a turning point, I guess, a real lesson?
yeah. Well, there was one horrific thing that happened, certainly at Police Scotland, and I'm not going to get into any detail about what was involved, but I do remember it happening, and comms was partly to blame for it. And just on the day, I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. I just thought, oh God, this is horrific. How can I come back from this? But you do need to just pick yourself up and go on with it. And I think one of the key things I've learned as well is that you can worry about these things too much. 6 months later, you've forgotten about it. Do you know, so's other people. So don't actually worry about it too much.
Mhm.
I used to worry about stuff at work quite a lot, and then eventually just decided to stop doing it, and it made my life a lot easier. But I mean, you're right. Everyone makes mistakes. I remember when I worked at the Lancashire Evening Post, I was writing a story about, I can't remember what it was a picture caption or something. And it was about a baby swan, and I called it a signet. And when I came back into work the next morning, there was a um, post-it note on my desk saying a signet, S-I-G-N-E-T, is a ring. A baby swan is called a signet, C-Y-G-N-E-T, signed the editor. And I thought, all right, okay, I spelt it wrong, but it got through the news editor, it got through the back bench, it got through all the subs, and in theory, you're the editor, you're supposed to have checked everything, so it's still got on the
Mhm.
paper.
Mhm.
But then I realised, well, no, it was my mistake, and
Mhm.
I had to own it. And ever since then, you know, everyone makes mistakes, right? And I will have made written typos and stuff in copy or whatever myself. You just need to try and limit it as much as possible. I remember one of the things I was told in my training course at Westminster Press, which stuck with me, was this maximum of you're only as good as your last story, right?
Yeah.
So uh, you could be a award-winning journalist, but if you write a nib that's got a typo in it, that's your mistake. Somebody else is going to have to fix it.
Yeah.
Do you know? And that always stuck with me. And as I was saying this earlier on, I think the principles of accuracy and attention to detail are absolutely critical for journalists and for comms people.
Yeah.
Um, and the folk for Police Scotland on the call will tell you I was an absolute pain in the neck at Police Scotland about always banging on about spelling and grammar and attention to detail. But for me, we wanted to be seen as a professional comms outfit. And for me, you can't be a professional comms person if you can't spell or don't know how to use an apostrophe.
Yes.
It's a red line. I was not prepared to compromise on that. I was very demanding in that regard.
Yeah, I have to say that very similar conversations go on in our agency that, I think copywriting is a core skill of being a PR and a comms person. And,
Yeah,
if you can't get that right, then why would a client rely on you for other stuff? If you
yeah.
can't get the sort of, so yeah, I'm a bit of a broken record when it comes to spelling and grammar also. Um, Next question is reflected in the chat as well, which is looking back on your sort of 36 years with the benefit of hindsight. What would you tell your younger self, or what is there one thing that you wish you had done differently at the start of your comms career?
Um, well, I guess that point I made there about not stressing about stuff, I would have, I'd tell my younger self, don't worry about things. I mean, one of the things Colin Edgar taught me about PR was that sometimes you're going to have to just take the kicking, and you're going to have to enjoy it. You're going to have to say thanks, come back tomorrow and give me another kicking. Uh, but don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. Because I say in 6 months you'll have forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, it's important, comms in particular, to plan and prepare, cover all the bases. But sometimes things happen that are out with your control. So just don't worry about it.
How do you do that? Because there's probably some other people that are listening to this. Because I'm thinking this is, well, how do you do that? It's okay. Well, don't worry about it. It's like, well, how do you stop worrying about stuff?
Well, I did this thing, right? Now this might seem really stupid, right? But it worked for me. I used to overthink stuff all the time, and I would go over stuff in my head. And eventually I thought, do you know what? I'm busy now. I'll come back to this later on and I'll think about it later on tonight. At 10 o'clock tonight, I'll think about it then. And then it got to 10 o'clock and I thought, oh, I'll think about it tomorrow. And just kept pushing it away.
Kicking
And
the
it
can
worked.
down the road.
It worked, aye. Let's just stop worrying about it. No, you don't,
Okay.
sometimes it's not impossible to do that completely. You still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about stuff that had happened at work and going over things in your head or remembering something you were supposed to have done. Um, so it's not possible. It's not possible to do that completely, but to a large extent, is push it away a wee bit. But that's not been. You still want to be professional, and
Yeah.
so it's within reason, kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I think in the job that we do, when it's PR and comms, that it can be high pressure. There are reputations at stake, depending on who you work for, vulnerable audiences. And I guess
Yeah,
from your police days, we have a saying that we use in the office sometimes that, it's PR, not ER. But I guess actually when you work for one of the blue light services, that actually, sometimes, you can't really apply that. So I guess thinking about your Police Scotland days as well, did you, obviously that there would have been, serious incidents, sensitivities, etc. So how did you manage the sort of stress and pressure around things like that when, I guess people's lives were at risk, or, potentially when there were sort of serious incidents involving loss of life as well?
Well, so first of all, just mention that when you're talking about PR and ER, right? I was always really clear that sometimes we were dealing with stuff, either the council or more likely police, that if you didn't want the bad thing to get written about in the paper, then don't do the bad thing. It's not a comms problem. It's an operational
Mm-hmm.
issue that's
Yeah.
caused this. It's somebody's done something they shouldn't have that's caused this to be written about or brought, been on the TV news or whatever. So it's not a comms problem. And sometimes comms can't fix it. We can maybe make it better or not make it worse. That was always a guiding principle, is try not to make it worse. In terms of the dealing with all those incidents, the benefit of working in somewhere like Police Scotland is it was a pretty big team. we've got a news desk that worked every day of the year. Extended hours on shift on a rota, so a lot of different people, a lot of experience, and a lot of other people in the department, managers and so on, who had experience in dealing with things as well. So you weren't always on your own. There was always a bunch of people, and I always benefit. I don't think I certainly didn't always have all the answers. And one of the things I benefited from was, and one of the things I tried to do was where possible, get our ducks in a row in the department. Let's think about this ourselves first and work out, is what we're going to suggest actually best advice from comms. I was always quite keen that nothing left the department unless the department was happy with it. Do you know?
Yeah.
And I always thought as well, so I don't know if I said this earlier, that I think a key function or a key part of the comms job is to go to, if there's something's happened or you're getting asked about something by media or whatever, and you need to speak to senior leaders, don't go with the problem, go with the solution. And going back to a question about interviews, I think that's difficult. It's really, really difficult to demonstrate you've done that, particularly in competency-based interviews nowadays, as a journalist, when it's not necessarily something that's ever come up, but it might have come up in your job as a comms person. So talk about how you would go with the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And we talk about that a lot as well, going to clients with
Yeah.
a solution already in hand, and some recommendations. Okay, there's another couple of questions coming through in the chat. How did you identify and seize opportunities that helped you progress to your first leadership role?
How did I what? Sorry, see and
How did you identify and seize opportunities that helped you secure your first leadership role?
Well, I suppose my leadership role was as head of comms at Police Scotland. The other ones I'd been a sort of manager or whatever. The I think, like sort of touches on a previous question as well. I think the highlight of my career was having the opportunity to transform the comms function at Police Scotland, which, for those of you on the call who are not aware, Police Scotland was only created in 2013 when the previous police services in Scotland were merged. And at that time, the focus was on operational policing, so comms and other sort of back office functions, if you like, were just shoved together with no real thought given to whether they needed to change. People were in different terms and conditions. We had something like 5 or 6 different phone numbers for the media to get us, and you get a different service depending on which part of the country, literally depending on which part of the country you were working in. So I saw, as soon as I started at Police Scotland, that, I mean, I didn't need to see it myself. I was told about it frequently by journalists who were complaining about the service, and politicians when it actually get raised in the Scottish Parliament at one point. But I had the opportunity to redesign the comms function there and create a modern comms operating department, if you like. So I suppose that was, in terms of leadership, it was an opportunity for me to grab that and go with it, and I benefited from the fact that the chief at the time was really, really supportive. I mean, ultimately I took a business case forward that needed significant financial investment at a time when other bits of the service were being cut, and we got it because they were so supportive of what we were trying to do. So I guess in terms of that, seeing, so it was a question of seeing opportunities. It was, for me, that was it. It was actually redesign this and redesign the function,
Make it work.
and make it work, and turn it into a proper professional outfit. Now, that's not to say that the people in it weren't professional, but what was really keen was that other people in Police Scotland treated us as comms professionals and stopped coming to us telling us how to do our job. and stopped coming asking for posters or Twitter accounts, and came to us and actually ask us for help because we were the
Laugh.
experts.
I'm laughing because I used to work in the police as well, and
Yeah,
it was pre the emergence of Police Scotland, and that sort of coming in, being asked for leaflets and posters was
yeah,
quite a common request. Yeah, and having been in the police as well, I know how much resource there was there, and so I can see how big a task that would have been to bring all of that together into a sort of single function that works
yeah.
right
I mean,
across the country.
it's like police being the police as well. You would sometimes get a junior officer coming saying, "My boss says you have to produce a
Yeah,
poster,"
yeah.
and they're like, "Well, no," and they don't like you
Well,
saying
they
no.
don't want to go back and tell their senior officer,
Yeah.
no.
So
So,
sometimes comms were do saying no to really senior people all the
yeah.
time. I mean, uh, again, so I suppose touching some of the other questions, one of the roles of comms, I think, is sometimes you're the sole voice in the room who are saying no,
Mm,
or saying, have you actually thought about this? Have you thought
yeah,
about the impact of what you're proposing to
yeah.
do here and what it's going to mean over here?
And asking why quite
Uh,
often.
and you know, senior leaders don't necessarily have all the answers. Sometimes sometimes they've not even thought of all the questions, and sometimes it's comms that are it's actually saving the organisation from itself.
Yeah,
And I guess that another thing I would say about that is that there is absolutely no such thing as a stupid question.
yeah, I agree.
You know,
And do you think, this is one of the questions that's in the chat, was there anything that you learned or experienced within Glasgow City Council that you were able to take into that Police Scotland job? Like, were there key learnings or key experiences that were able to transfer into that role and, were really vital?
um, just well, I guess the two things I suppose. What one would be, you know, remembering that they're thinking about the public as your customers, which was police weren't used to that. They're not customers of the public, but no, actually you're providing a service.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I brought that with me, and also just that experience of working in a political environment where, oh, the cops are, they're engaging with local authorities and government a lot, but they don't, they've never worked in that environment. So I was able to actually bring a lot of advice around that side of things as well. So that really helped. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Over the 36 years, and we can look at probably journalism and PR potentially separately in this question, but you must have witnessed quite a lot of key changes over that time in journalism and in PR. What would you say are the most notable or important changes that have taken place?
Well, no, I guess not really in journalism because I left the Herald in 2005, and I don't I don't think we even had a website at that point.
Mm,
Uh, Certainly we weren't publishing to the web. It was just for the newspaper. So um, I really left before
the whole
websites
digital
were a thing
explosion,
for
yeah.
news, and certainly before social media. I mean, even when I started at Strathclyde Police, I think they must have had a website from, I can't really remember, but it must have had a website. Certainly social media didn't exist. No one had heard of Twitter. Um, and we did just issue press releases. So that I would say that was the biggest change, obviously, from a PR comms perspective, was the the proliferation of the web and social media, and with it the ability to communicate directly with your audiences, residents, businesses, whatever. Um, where, where previously you were relying on the media to get your message across, and the media didn't always like that we were able to
Mm,
do that. I mean, sometimes would ask us not to. Well, no, our job's to communicate with the public. It's not communicate with the media. So we had to resist that, um, and that you know can present a lot of challenges as well. I mean, I remember one thing we worked on at Glasgow City Council was a series of school closures, some like 22 primary schools that they were proposing to close, and there's nothing more contentious than shutting a primary school. And the comms around that was designed to in such a way that every single person who was affected, whether that was a member of staff or a parent, heard about it directly from the council. So we had a really complicated integrated comms plan that involved personalised letters to every parent that arrived on the day that head teachers were being told and that staff were being told. So in theory, every single person heard from us, from the council. And again, that was really before Twitter was a thing. See, nowadays, I don't think that's possible. I don't think it'd be possible to do that anymore.
Yeah,
It just burst straight away.
yeah, it moves too quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So that was a big change. And then also, I mean, social media as well. The challenge there is that the individuals who wanted their own Twitter account, and then would maybe burst stuff that you were planning to announce.
Was this council or police or both?
No, not so much council, mostly police. Not necessarily. I mean, occasionally say things. Oh, you could have kept that quiet for a wee bit. We're about to announce it in a couple of days' time. You know, didn't cause any major problems. It was just annoying.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Okay, we've got another question in the chat. You mentioned the benefit of a diploma being helpful if you were at the beginning of your career. What are the key topics or modules it should include?
Well, that was a diploma in newspaper journalism. So that, I mean, that included the modules and that were around newspaper or media law, basically laws of defamation and contempt of court, which if you want to work in police comms, you absolutely need to understand contempt of court. And also, if you want to work as a journalist, you need to understand contempt of court and defamation. There's also a shorthand module. I mean, that course, you had to get 100 words a minute shorthand, or you were out of your job. You were told not to come back to the paper at the end of the course. So I'm a advocate for shorthand. I know it doesn't get done everywhere all the time now, but I think I could not have worked as a journalist without shorthand. You weren't allowed
Can
to,
you still do it?
yeah.
Let's see, yeah.
I'm sure it's still 100 words a minute, but I mean, you weren't allowed to go to court if you didn't have 100 words a minute. That was the bar that a judge would accept your shorthand as a verbatim record of what was said in court if you had that, if you'd passed a test at that level. So without it, you weren't even allowed to report from court by the papers you worked for, or certainly papers I worked for. So I don't really know about. I'm not qualified to say what should be in a comms or PR diploma. I don't think, having never done one myself.
You could probably have a look at the PRCA website and get some detail on that. So we plug for the PRCA there. So we've got about 10 minutes left. If anyone's got any other questions, please put them into the chat now. I've just got my sort of last question, which is the one that I always tend to wrap up these sessions with, which is what are the top tips that you would give to people that are either just starting out in their career in PR or in the early years of their PR career? What would you tell people to do or not do to sort of lay the ground for a successful career?
Well, I guess it's the stuff I've talked about already about never assuming anything, except perhaps the fact you've assumed something. I mean, I've done that a few times. I've actually considered situations, think, what am I actually assuming here? And stuff, some will pop in your head that kind of can save you from a problem. So never assume anything. And I suppose going with that is the fact that, as I said earlier, there's no such thing as a stupid question. You might be the sole voice in the room that you're sitting there with a question in your head you want to ask, and you think I'm going to look stupid if I ask this. But actually, that's the pivotal question that could stop a bad thing from becoming worse. So no such thing as a stupid question, and that maximum of you're only as good as your last story. And then, I mean, I guess briefly as well, one other thing I get taught on my training course that I always remembered was what they called the Garden Gate story, and this was a story about a journalist, a reporter who'd gone to someone's door. I don't know what the story was, but the chap at the door, this reporter and a bunch of other reporters had all gone up to this woman's house trying to get an interview, and she told them all to beat it. She wasn't interested, but they all left her business cards. And the next day she had a change of heart and phoned one of these journalists back, and he got this guy and he got the interview, whatever. And at the end he said to her, "Why did you phone me? There was a bunch of people at your door." And she said, "You were the only person that shut the garden gate on the way out." So be courteous and be kind to people.
Yes, be kind, be polite, have good
Yeah.
manners, you'll go far.
And then the other things I say earlier on as well, be professionally curious, really understand the organisation you work for, and why things happen. Become indispensable so that if a situation happens or a media inquiry comes in, for example, you can instinctively know what to do with it, how it should be handled, what the answer should be. I mean, working in police comms, there was so much going on. It was really, really difficult to stay on top of everything. And the way they're structured, there's people there who have got expertise in different sort of business areas, if you like. So, maybe a question about public protection that would come in, and there was somebody in the team who was an expert. You would just go to them and ask them what's the answer to this. And likewise, Glasgow City Council, in terms of education, person there just knew everything you needed to know about education and be able to tell you the answer off the top of their head. So try and become indispensable at that. And also, as I said earlier, go with the solution, not the problem.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say to young people in particular is don't be afraid to pick up the phone, right? Notice that younger people, for some reason, seem reluctant to phone people. They rely on email. And you cannot really understand what a journalist is asking. So you always get a lot of straightforward questions, but sometimes you can't really understand what they're after until you speak to them on the phone
Yeah.
and have
I
a
don't,
conversation.
I totally agree with that. I think that there isn't a week that goes past that I don't say to at least one person in my team, have you phoned them? Why don't you lift the phone and have a conversation? You're right in terms of media inquiries and really understanding what it is that a journalist asks, but in terms of building relationships, even with those counterparts
Yeah.
in your organisation, building relationships with clients, you can really only do that with a two-way conversation. So yes, I would that would be a top tip from me also.
So just mention one other thing as well, and that idea of becoming indispensable. And this goes back to the other question that was asked earlier about opportunities that help progress to your first leadership role. You volunteer for stuff, put yourself forward to be the person that will fix a thing or will do a piece of work. So Glasgow, one of the things that helped me get the job at Police Scotland was the fact that I led a piece of work at Glasgow to transform the comms function at Glasgow and its arm's length bodies, which I ended up leaving during it, and I don't think it progressed after it, but I volunteered for that and I was able to talk about it in my interview for the police. So put yourself forward for stuff.
Good. Okay. There's just one more question in the chat. I'm going to ask it because I think it's a really good question. How do you deal with situations where your advice was perhaps not taken or listened to, and what were the implications of that?
Told you so. It's like, take a clipping of the front page of the newspaper and send it to the person who refused to take your advice. No, don't do that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we're comms advisors, right? We're not in charge of the organisation, right? So, and I know it can be really, really galling for a comms person to get told how to do their job or for their advice to be ignored. But at the end of the day, we are advisors and our job is to advise, and that's it. if they don't want to take advice, it's not.
Yeah.
What I used to say at work is it's not our ball. You know, using a
Yeah.
football analogy, it's not our ball, right? To give advice, if they don't want to take it, that's up to them. See, in 6 months, you'll have forgotten about it.
Yeah. Okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Worry
exactly.
about it at 10 o'clock tonight. Okay, great. That's good advice, Chris. And thank you so much for sharing all your experience and your words of wisdom. Just to let everyone know, the session has been recorded today, so it will go on to PRCA Scotland's YouTube. So if you want to share it with any colleagues, you can do that later. We are hoping to have another one of these sessions before the end of the year, potentially in November. So keep your eyes peeled for details and dates of that. And just finally, thank you to everyone for coming along today, and just a final thanks to Chris. Heading back to retirement. Thank you for coming out of it for just an hour and spending it with us. So thank you again. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Bye bye.
Bye.